It's very comforting and in some ways quite liberating to be outdoors and to be physically talking to all of you. I'm Sneha Jha, editor of ETCIO, and I'm so happy to welcome you all to what happens to be the second physical on-ground event of ETCIO after the pandemic. And I'm even more happy to have a very prestigious group of IT leaders to discuss this very relevant and interesting topic. I know it's a very busy time of the year for all of you, so I truly appreciate you all being here with us for this roundtable discussion hosted by ETCIO in association with Recorded Future, a security intelligence company with coverage across infrastructure, adversaries, and targets. The topic for today's discussion is intelligence-led security and why it matters to India's BFSI sector. Now, the numbers are alarming. Research says that the BFSI sector experiences cyber attacks 300 times more than any other industry vertical. This goes on to show how lucrative a target it is for the cyber attackers. We've heard of the Log4j vulnerability, emoted banking Trojan, NetWalker, ransomware, and the Cerberus financial Trojan. In a world of aggressive uncertainty, intelligence-led security is the only equalizer. Intelligence-led security is evidence-based, contextualized, relevant, real-time insights into the intent and capability of your adversaries. And it helps you take timely, proactive decisions to defend your financial institution. It is unique in the sense that it supports your tactical security team, your SOC, all the way up to your C-suite executives by keeping them informed on business risk. So this topic is of great significance in these volatile times. We have with us industry practitioners who've been there, done that, and are here to help. And they've helped a large amount of companies to amp up their security posture. With me today is Stefan Truve, co-founder and CTO of Recorded Future. Stefan, welcome to today's discussion. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing your insights and global perspective. With that, I'd like to hand it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, and very nice to see you all here. Thank you for joining us. So I thought I would kick this off by giving a little overview of what we do at Recorded Future, starting off with a little bit of the philosophy behind what we do, and then sort of actually how we do these things. So, as you said, it's never been a better time to be a criminal than today. You know, you can hide away far on the other side of the globe and commit your crimes in countries which don't even go after you, even if you are attributed for having done something. So we on the good side, I think, have to figure out how to handle this. And I think there are two things. Intelligence is one of the key things. The other one, which I hope we can come back to today, is I think that information sharing between the good guys is actually of vital importance here. If we don't collaborate the way the bad guys do, we will always be left behind. But let's come back to that in the discussion later on. So I'll give you a little bit quick intro to Recorded Future. We started the company 13 years ago. Our ambition from the start has been to build what we like to call a digital twin, a risk-oriented or threat-oriented digital twin of the world. Today, we are about 750 people. We are headquartered in the US in Boston, but I happen to come from Sweden, where we have all our core R&D facilities. Today, we're very happy to have 750 colleagues. We are 8, I think, here in India right now, expanding very rapidly. In total, we have more than 6,000 analysts who are using our products today. And actually, that number is interesting in one aspect, and that's the fact that we're now seeing that the Recorded Future analysts are in themselves becoming a source. We are starting to see that when several of our users are interested in a topic, that in itself means that it's interesting. If 100 Recorded Future analysts are looking for a specific IOC in the system, it's actually an indication that there is some kind of campaign going on. To get back to the background of our idea, so as I said, we wanted to build a complete risk-oriented digital twin of the world. The reason is that we, from the start, when we set out, we actually started out looking at geopolitical threats. So we were gathering information about everything from political unrest to military operations, disease outbreaks, natural disasters. But after a couple of years, some of our clients actually said to us that, you guys should really focus on cyber threats because we see that emerging. So this was around 2010, 2011. And fortunately, we had built a very general architecture, so we could actually expand that to cover more kinds of threats. And today we see 3 pillars of threats, if you like: the kinetic geopolitical part, the cyber threats, and recently also influence operations. And what we're saying is that these threats are constantly converging. And maybe the best or actually worst example of that now is what we're seeing in Ukraine, where of course the Russian forces, as they invaded, at the same time they attempted, fortunately not as successfully as we were fearing, to shut down the Ukrainian infrastructure. And of course, at the same time, the Russian propaganda machine was pumping out its message about how they were actually there to save things. So, and this is not unique. I think in any kind of operation today, these 3 things are happening at the same time. In many cases, one happens before the others. So by collecting information about all 3 domains, you actually have one chance of staying slightly ahead of the bad guys, at least before they go into the second or third domain of attack. So our purpose is really to automate as much as possible of what people like to call the intelligence cycle. If you go into the, let's call it professional intelligence community, the military side and so on, they all talk about this intelligence cycle where you start out setting your directions, planning your activities, then you go out in the field and collect data. You take that raw data, you process it, refine it in different ways. You end up writing reports and recommendations, which of course then goes back to those who ordered it so that they can set new directions and suggest new planning directives. And of course, this is an ever ongoing work. And we set out from the start to automate as much as possible of this. We all know that one of the scarcest resources are the human capacities, the human analysts here. I think you all experience that probably when you try to fill your positions. So the more we can automate, the more we can free up humans to concentrate on the hard things which the algorithms are not suited for. Let me give you a concrete example of what we do in this field. So one of the things which we have been working on is to, as quickly as possible, detect, for example, ransomware attacks or other kind of malware attacks. So the way we do that is that we have now mechanisms both in-house and we are licensing sources to collect malware samples. Our own clients can actually also upload malware samples into our system and have them detonated there. So using this information, we build an up-to-date list of indicators of compromise. So IP addresses and domains, which are currently serving as active command and control nodes for malwares. Of course, that raw list in itself is interesting, but actually it contains quite a few positives, a few false positives, I should say. So what we then do is that we have a mechanism for verifying those. So we go out and actively ping those suspected IOCs, and we can produce a high quality list. That list is one of the key assets we provide to our clients, so they can download that and use that to configure their firewalls or their network monitoring systems. However, of course, the interesting thing is if you could also identify victims. So next stage, what we do is we actually take that list of active nodes, and through our partners, we acquire netflow data. So we actually get traffic data about which other IPs in the world are communicating actively with those identified malicious C2 nodes out there. So that's actually allowing us to identify the victims. First time I realized that you could actually acquire this kind of data and actually do that automatic victim identification was a bit of a revelation to me personally. And our own analysts have been using this now for a couple of years. I'll share some examples. So one of the first things we discovered using this was even before we automated the process, was we managed to identify a Chinese-driven attack on the Catholic Church, both here in Asia and in the Vatican in Italy. 2 other recent local examples are about a year ago. We used the same process to identify attacks on power stations, power generation stations here in India. There were 10 stations we identified which were communicating with servers in China in a way that they definitely should not be doing. And the last example of this, the recent example I'm sure you all have fresh in mind, is the power outage here in Mumbai, where again, we could look at netflow data and see that that was with very high likelihood, as we always like to say. There is no certainty in cyber, as we all know. Very high likelihood, again, it was a cyber attack, which was at least one of the causes behind that attack.
Was some of these reports published on your portal?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question because we have a policy from the start when we started the company. Christopher, my co-founder, and I, we said that let's never ever waste money on silly advertising. Let's spend that money on having analysts do good work and publish that. So our policy is when we see these kind of things, we always share it in the open. Sometimes typically what we would do if we identified a certain victim, we will let them know first so they have time to do some remediation. But then we actually publish it, so we are working with leading news organizations, and very often we actually have direct collaboration with investigative journalists who are looking into these kinds of attacks.
So would you have shared this with the government?
In this room, I can say that we definitely share this with the government. We had an interesting reaction there, actually. The first thing they asked was essentially, how could you know this? You're not in our systems. And the fact that we could observe this behavior just from the outside was, I think, quite shocking to them, actually. But we have since then been working, very closely with them on describing the process for how we identify this and suggest ways to counter these kind of things.
Can I ask another question?
Let's be interactive. Fine with me.
Okay?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Or you want to finish the?
No.
I might forget.
No, that's okay.
You
Please
had
continue.
shown about geopolitical risk, and you said that after 2010, you got into the whole cyber piece of it. So, would you get alerts of any geopolitical activities? Or different than the cyber domain?
Absolutely. So so we've divided. Now we're sort of completely skipping my script here, but we've packaged our product into different use case categories, which we sell as different modules. So if you have the geopolitical module, you would be able to get alerts. And typically, what people use this for is to set up alerts, for wherever they have their branch offices, for example. And that would include things like civil unrest, military activities, if you're in a bad place in the world, natural disasters, infectious disease outbreaks, and a whole different kind of categories there. And so you can use that both to monitor your own locations, but, same thing, I'm always saying that if you're traveling somewhere, you can use that service actually to, see whether you should be packing your bulletproof vest or not as you're going there. And you can also use it for supply chain. So you can see that this is clearly interesting if you want to secure, which are the important ports which are critical to your supply chain. So I think, if you have a holistic perspective on business continuity, the geopolitical part is equally important as the cyber part. Good. For the sake of time, I think I will actually skip this example. So we have several examples on how we automate this, but in general, we're focusing. When we talk about our users, it's really two categories. One is the human analyst. That's sort of our primary user, if you like. But we always try to encourage our clients to, together with that, do as much automation and integration as possible. So today we are integrating with more than 100 different systems. So typically, if you're getting our feeds, you're using your analysts to understand maybe the sort of high-level long-term things, but you're also integrating it with your SIM systems or your TIP and so on. So you can say that there are two kinds of integrations. One's where you download different kind of threat lists, as we like to call them, which could be the IOCs I talked about before. It could be current threat actors, all kinds of things. But you can also use our APIs to enrich your other systems. Even if you have a system which we don't have enrichment with, but which has any kind of web interface to the systems, which I guess everyone has today, we actually have a product which allows you to directly augment that web-based interface to any system at all. So you'll actually, for example, see your augmentation of risk scoring as we do it directly in the web pages for any kind of monitoring system. Sometimes we borrow this model of the world from the intelligence community, and so people like to talk about the blue, red, and gray. The gray, as I like to see, that's the whole of the internet. All the infrastructure which is out there. And then what we want to do is we want to map the blue and the red. So the blue are the good guys, you guys are on the table here and your peers. So essentially what we have done is we have already out of the box mapped about 500,000 organizations. We know what their organizational structure is like, their subsidiaries and so on. We know what digital resources and assets you have in terms of IP address ranges, domains, everything you can see from the outside, including, what technology are you running in your web servers, how have you configured your mail servers, and so on. So essentially, that allows any of these organizations to get exactly the outside in view that the bad guys have. So, shame on you all if you haven't done your homework and made sure that you know what the bad guys can know about you, right? And then the red part is then mapping the adversaries. So again, they of course also have infrastructure. They are, I would say many times they are unfortunately as efficient as you are in running an operation. These guys are also now cloud-based and using the latest technologies in all ways. So mapping them amounts again to having knowledge about which infrastructure they're using, the tech stacks they're using. And when we do that, we don't only map them like this, we are actually using our systems, we are inside their forums. So we have built a whole infrastructure for getting into the criminals' discussion forums where they are talking about attacks. And as I said, they are very collaborative. So someone who's developing a new malware will use these forums to ask us about ideas and tricks. How can I use this new vulnerability in building my new malware? So that actually means that we have deep insights in the system into what they're using, what technologies they're using. In particular, long before the official vulnerability CVSS score or something like that is published, our system knows if there's a high risk of exploit of a new vulnerability because we see what the bad guys are talking about. And so can you using the system like this. So the key thing for us is that to make this feasible, I would say both technologically and economically, what we from the start said that we're building one view of the world, we're building one model. The intelligence graph, as we call it, collects all the information about the blue, red, and gray space. It's constantly shifting. Today, it consists of some 8 billion known entities. That would be the IPs, domains, organizations, people, locations, etc., and hundreds of billions of relationships between these. And constantly growing. We add about 5 million new entities every day. Every day, actually, we get about 1 million new domains registered, for example. And just to keep track of that and know which of those might be, for example, typo squats, which could be related to an upcoming phishing attack, is of course crucial and something where you must have automation to be able to do this. As I said, we package all of this into different use cases. We started out building one product for everyone, but of course, as the data grew in size and the complexity grew in the kind of analytics you want to do, we realized that we have to make this more user-friendly. So now we're offering currently 9 different modules. As you can see here, it goes from SecOps, which is fairly sort of straightforward operations, all the way up to threat intelligence, which is the most, I would say, open-ended analytics platform where an analyst can, for example, explore evolving patterns of where attacks are happening, what geography, what industry is being actively sought after, for example. But we also give modules for third-party intelligence, for vulnerability management. For the financial sector, we have a separate module now which deals only with card fraud, where we have a very sophisticated method of gathering all cards which are for sale, for example, in different kinds of forums and marketplaces, including algorithms to actually understand where these cards come from. Are they from online theft or are they actually from physical skimming and things like that? And the last addition we have is what we call attack surface intelligence. We recently acquired a company, Security Trails, who I would say are the kings of attack surface intelligence. They've spent the last 5 years building up a tremendous infrastructure for gathering up-to-date information about all the attack surface aspects, what domains and other things like that, but also the tech stack that you can see visibly from the outside. So, to wrap this up, our modest ambition is to be the intelligence platform of the world. And I think the fact that we're building one platform that serves many different categories, and actually, as I mentioned, that our community is contributing, not only by, as I said, that we can see what people are looking at, but actually we are very open so that anyone who's using our system can suggest new sources. So if someone finds a new criminal forum, they suggest it to us. We have a very rapid process for getting access to that. And of course, everything is shared. So we all benefit from working together, finding where the bad guys try to talk and automatically getting that information and sharing it with everyone in the community. So with that, I wrap it up, I think. Thank you.
Stefan, thank you so much for giving us that high-level view of what Recorded Future does and how it does it so well. You also did a great job of outlining the subject, so I will not use a long preamble to get into the discussion. Instead, I'll just let the great minds here talk. And on that note, I would like to introduce our illustrious set of panelists. They are Milind Mungale, CEO, NSDL E-Governance InfoSec; Kersi Tavadia, CIO, Bombay Stock Exchange, Mahesh Ramamurthy, CIO, Yes Bank, Mitesh Tolia, CISO and VP, Reliance Jio Payment Bank, Shailendra Kothavale, Chief Compliance and Risk Officer, correct. V. Subramaniam, CISO, IDBI Bank, Amit Godekar, VPIS, Axis Bank, Stefan Truve, co-founder and CTO, Recorded Future. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Mr. Mungle, I'd like to start off with you. As the CEO of NSDL e-Governance InfoSec, how do you determine the appropriate level of business risk appetite for your enterprise?
So I'd like to say that the basic idea of coming out with NSDL e-Governance InfoSec as an initiative was because we found that that is the challenge that many of our ecosystem players, mid-sized organizations face when it comes to determining the risk with regards to business or cyber or any other kind. Even many people don't still know about the brand reputation part. And we found that as an organization which is handling so much of sensitive data, it was necessary for us to make sure that our ecosystem players, our business partners are also equally secured and aware about the information security. So that is the reason why we came out with this. When it comes to talking about determining for our own organization, we look at it as the worst case situation. For a simple reason that the kind of information that we handle, process and store itself is justifying enough to look at the most pessimistic situation and work towards securing it. Though the practical situation is not that pessimistic, but from strategy point of view, we look at it that way. So that is how we work.
Correct. Right. Mr. Tavaria, you handle an institution which is of national significance, and any sort of a security threat to BSE would cause ripples across the entire critical infrastructure of the company. So in that sense, failure is not an option for you. And while you adopt complex digital technologies within your enterprise, your attack surface is becoming wide and varied. So how are you dealing with this constantly accelerating speed, frequency, and severity of attacks? And how are you prioritizing risk at BSE?
We keep it very simple, actually. We are always learning, so there's never a fixed so whatever solution that we've implemented gets reviewed and ridiculed or criticized by the team very regularly.
So there's a constant feedback.
There's a constant feedback that why did you buy this? We are not, expectation levels are X when you're trying to review. So I think that was the healthy culture we promoted, to let people come out and tell us frankly that what we're seeing is not what we are getting or was expecting. So we learn fast, fail fast. Therefore, that's the motto with which we work, because no security solution, that's what we have believed. We have, in fact, as we speak, we have renewed our, 5 years ago, we created our SOC. That was one of the first in the country. We said, no, 5 years is too long a time. Now we did an audit and reviewed now what are the learnings over the last 5 years. Did we use what we bought it to the potential? Many times you may just buy it, but you never use in the sense effectively using. You might be just having it or what do we say, the value creation. So I think this is a constant learning game. So, and many a times, and I can say in this room that we have found the OEMs themselves are not even aware what the products can deliver. Because the kind of, one is selling products, which is very well done by the marketing guys. Okay. But when you come into value creation or usage of this thing, it is always the internal teams who try to slog it out or create like in Indian terms, it is called a jugaad. I don't know whether you understand the meaning. It's somehow make things happen and work. But we have to make sure it works. Because OEMs giving you the solutions is not, if you're going to depend only on the partners and OEMs to give you solutions, we don't believe in that. So we have the internal teams are very, very, I would say we are all R&D oriented. The entire SOC team which is there, they are all freshers or young minds. to ensure that we don't have any legacy of old wines. So everybody is freshly thinking and trying to do an R&D. So that is how basically we work.
Can I add a comment on that? I think I love the fact that you mentioned this about how are they actually being used.
Yeah.
So the last couple of years, what we've done is we've added a lot of metrics in our system so that you as a user can actually go in and see what usage is actually being done by the product. And so I think both for you as a customer and for us as a supplier, it's vital that the system gets used, as you say. Otherwise, you just have a checkbox for it, but it doesn't give you any real
In
value.
fact, just to share an example, we implemented, I don't want to name our technology, and we call it was done by a partner X of them. Then we call the OEMs, like expert like you, who came from abroad and who was the founder and planner. And he said, this is not the way my product is supposed to be used. Yeah, so I'm just trying to say here is, it's not the local guy. See, because there's a very big gap between you sitting in Sweden in your lab and delivering a world-class product and the way it is getting implemented in India in some organization by some partner. Okay, so that gap is huge. That's why I'm saying it is, again, when we keep on asking, many times common sense is not working in these industries. Many times we ask a common sense question, why? Because if this was a product, how is the world getting protected and why it can't work only in BSc?
So the pushing the box mentality needs to change.
Yeah, because most of the time it is default. See, it is like this agents or what do you call partners implementing solutions. I think that's where the very big gap of knowledge. The people in the lab, he has created a product to be used in so many other features. It's like filtering the knowledge. So by that time, it's only 10% knowledge which is there with the end user. Mm-hmm. So I think this cycle needs to, this gap needs to shorten, and because the cycle of audit and review has to be shortened. That's how we do it.
So, Mr. Tiwari, an extension to this question, what are the kind of capabilities that you look for in a threat intelligence platform? What do you think, what are some of the specific things that you're looking for so that it is usable and is relevant to your enterprise?
One is that it has to be, very first thing, it has to be usable. A threat which is a very hypothetical thing, and then you start thinking about the threat which is not there. You start
it's like that Chicken Little syndrome that you're always worried that the sky will fall on your head.
And so it has to be. So that's why I think the value create. The threat also has to have metrics or value which is of very high, very relevant, and it has to come in a format which can be consumed.
Right.
Many a times. And this is exactly what we have seen.
So audience centricity, so that your team is able to
because most of the time,
take actionable insights.
Because most of the time we give you such a 5 links. Now this year you start joining the dots. You missed one dot and you're gone on the wrong track in finding a solution. The person who has given you solution has given you more problem than the solution. Mm-hmm. So that's why our request is whosoever can give us appropriate, take this, fix it. Mm-hmm. Because if you start giving us to do further analysis, that's where the problem starts. Because instead of solving the problem, you're trying to solve a wrong analysis and trying to work on the. And this happens very rampantly. I don't mind sharing very bluntly because I have been there, done that, made my hands dirty. So that's the biggest problem in this industry.
Right. So in that sense, it becomes a game of a manual swivel chair exercise where not much is coming out of it. And
so at the end of the day, what happens is that frustration. Then you lose the focus area. You are trying to, somebody is giving, this is the tool to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And then you're trying to, why this tool is not solving the problem. This tool was never supposed to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. So just by getting a tool or indicators or this, it's not, because we get so many alerts. Like, for example, you said this, I don't know why you are not FBI if you have so many alerts, intelligence. Because we get subscription from all these guys who give these alerts. Many times we feel it is 80% junk.
No, and I think one of the key things there is to make it very personalized, so that's to be able to.
And nobody knows what is the right filter for us.
Correct.
Except
it has
for
to
you.
be very
Except for you, hopefully.
specific to the industry and the enterprise. Right. So with that thought, I'd like to move on to you, Mr. Ramamurthy. You're representing a bank. A bank is a custodian and a gatekeeper of the customer's money. In that sense, it's a huge responsibility, and you need to provide round-the-clock services. So, in that sense, you're a very attractive, lucrative prime target for cyber attacks. And like I mentioned earlier, that there have been so many cases of ransomware and banking trojans that have made their appearance in the past 2 years. How are you leveraging threat intelligence against the threat actors within your bank, and how are you looking at this whole piece?
So I think the biggest thing that we really need to understand is I would classify more internal and external, right? The big thing that we've really now realized is that we are it's a dynamic environment, right? Every day you get fair bit of understanding of what's happening around, and I think he did allude to it quite a bit, and he was also alluding to it. So to us, I think one of the big things that we've started going about is saying it is important to get our internal actors understand what it means by the data that they handle, what it means by the data that they handle. A simple case is, when there is so many stuff today, there are phishing emails, there are so many different basics to more complex actions that combine itself to create a threat, right? It is not a siloed one, and it's a learning process that happens. So at the end of the day, when we are a team as a staff, we are about 28,000 plus people, it is about how you keep constantly defining the right kind of education down to the last level and what you should and should not. So one is to detect, but more importantly is to understand what you are doing. So I think there is fair bit of work that is constantly being done to educate our staff and the key actors in terms of what they should be guarding against in these kind of situations. But more importantly, given the point of customer data, today we have obviously regulators are also being fairly, I would say, myopic in terms of what they expect out of a bank. But I think we always have to be slightly beyond it also, not just what they are. So there is fair bit of work that we have to do to even ask our own teams, cohorts, to essentially say that less information and targeted information is all that you require to service your job. So for example, the easiest thing is for a lot of people to ask for tons and tons of data because it seems to help in their business, it seems to help in but what it really ends up lying in someone's desktops, and then as the convergence happens in terms of the amount of threats coming in from various directions, there is a huge opportunity for someone to flip the data out. So there is something there. Also, what we're doing is constantly upgrading the noise that comes in from outside. I use the word noise because, to his point, it's a 98-2, but the 2% could be 90% at some point in time. So there is a fair bit of effort that is being done as a combination of internal and external partners, I would say, where we are in the constant mode of evaluating in terms of what kind of threats are coming in, what kind of data inputs coming in, which is not just monitoring our perimeters, but also monitoring transactions. Because at the end of the day, today, as a bank where we're leading in terms of our payment transactions, we process millions and millions of rupees on any given day. So it means that there is huge amount of focus we need to put in terms of even managing and tracking the pattern that comes across. Because there is threats that come in from various angles in different forms. So there is a combinational effort, and all of this is put together in terms of a constant review mechanism, constant review and governance. So governance comes much later, but try and move towards more detective, preventive approach rather than more reactive approach. Easier said than done. But yes, it's always a journey that you end up learning every every week when something comes up in front of you. And so today it's not just a technology problem, but it has to be a fair bit of inclusiveness that needs to be brought to the table to make them understand.
Right, right. So, Mr. Ramamurthy, what you're suggesting is that instead of just depending on the OEM, organizations should try to get their house in order. They should have a constant review mechanism, and they should use the cybersecurity reports to sort of enhance the training and awareness of their own employees to make sure that the slips don't happen on their end. And do you also suggest that there should be some periodic audit process to check how matured your security posture is? Do you think that would also help?
These there is again different forms of audit, right? As a bank and again financial institution, I think we probably have at least 7 to 8 different kinds of audit.
Yes.
It's not just one. So 7 to 8, and it's different.
Correct.
Right from a regulator downwards to internal. So first line of defense, second line of defense, each of them play their role in terms of how they do it. We also have concurrent audits. In a large way, we have concurrent audits which have now been enhanced itself to create more flexibility in terms of managing. So which means how does it get integrated into my fraud and risk teams who are probably monitoring. So anything that they detect and anomalies, is it also getting fed into the fraud and risk, which is online? So I think there is fair bit of triaging that happens now. And this triaging is obviously being able to listen, learn, and try to feed it. Now, we still won't be anywhere close to 100, but it is all about saying what we can at best be able to quickly respond. I think I would only say to respond rather than being able to sit back and then realize down the line. So that's the way I would put it.
Thank you. Mr. Tolia, cyber threats can hit you from anywhere, especially for a company like yours, which is a digital first company. Your digital risk footprint is huge. So, to keep ahead of these threats, how are you approaching threat intelligence at a strategic, operational, and tactical level within your organization?
I would take that question into 2 or 3 parts. One is, as you mentioned, how you're going to be putting in place your preventive controls. Then comes the detective. And I'm sure within this room, we will all agree that yes, we are going to be compromised. But the important thing is how soon do you recover from it? Like how organizations or individuals have their insurance, we also would need to fall back on experts who would be able to step in and tell us how we have got compromised if we do, because we have got an ear on the ground and listening to the dark web all the time. So those feeds will help us give a preemptive alert in terms of if any of our controls have failed. Taking the cue from Mahesh, we have more than enough external audits and internal audits to tell us that our house is in order. But at the end of the day, what matters is, as they say, the proof of the pudding is that your data is outside with somebody and you get to know about it from the third party. So, for us, as you rightly mentioned, the digital first organization, it's a matter of survival. So we have put in all the hygiene that is required, that goes without saying, it's like part of the hygiene, but we have gone beyond. We have subscribed to certain incident management services to ensure that in case of any abnormal activity, we have somebody to call on in the middle of the night, right? The good part is, as an organization today, there is a lot of awareness at all levels, especially at the board. And by virtue of a security team getting exposure at the board level, the sponsorship comes in easy. So that lets us get into engagement across the employees, internal and external stakeholders. Okay. So I think that's what has allowed us to build the awareness within the organization and outside. Okay. Well, we all realize that we have to keep doing what we need to do. We keep subscribing to the threats. As a bank, in fact, I'm not sure if Stefan is aware, but within India, we have got a very organized information or dissemination process where we have a CISO forum that is sponsored by our regulator, and very regularly we get advisories and alerts in case of any compromise of any member bank. Having said that, we always benchmark ourselves to the fact that when an advisory came in, have we already taken the preventive controls, or is it a learning when a regulator informs us? So that's what we benchmark our IS team on. So that allows us to be a step ahead and anticipate challenges. So that's probably a way we kind of do internal performance assessments, that are we learning on a preemptive basis. So if we were to take the example which is now the talk of the town, especially during the physical invasion of a country, there were very focused, targeted attacks. Okay. And at that time, people really didn't know what to do and what additional precautions you should take. So it was very simple. If any calls are going out of the network or any additional amount of data is going out, we need to keep a track on it. And those controls were already in place. And we were, looking at alerts around it. So we are saying that we should be prepared for such eventuality after having put in controls, so that your detective systems are in place.
Mr. Kothapale, how do you try to create a holistic threat intelligence capability across the primary use cases around, say, risk prioritization, risk assessment of new initiatives, planning, budgeting, staffing, and also executive communication?
So I think good question. It's an ongoing, ever-evolving process, and that's our continuous discussion point with the CISO. I think the most important thing, if I take a step back, is to ensure that the CISO and team understand our business or understand what we are into. For example, what we were 2 years back, suddenly COVID pushed us and forced us transform into a highly digital enabled company. And when I say digital enabled, it is still to some extent physical. There is some amount of physical involvement. We may not be as big as a bank. Maybe he mentioned 28,000 employees, but we are around 14,000 employees. And these employees are situated at bank branches. They are situated at our own branches. We also have our agents and our vendors. So now the ecosystem is very high, and the cyber threats could be from anywhere. Now, if I give a blue sky thinking, or if I give a blank paper to my CISO, the expectation or what he would want could be anything. But I may need to reprioritize when you spoke of budgets, when you spoke of risk. So we have developed a risk appetite framework in terms of for each areas of risk, and within that, each subdomain, what would we look at and what would be our appetite. And we would then accordingly allocate budgets, allocate people, allocate resources, depending on what we want to reach and where we want to reach. And you spoke of how do you prioritize within the risk. I don't think we can prioritize within the risk. I think each one is important. So for me, a cyber risk could be as important as maybe some other financial or operational risk lurking somewhere. But then within cyber risk, am I getting enough threat intelligence reports? Am I getting those alerts? I may need to zoom in. I may need to have something like, does a Ukraine or a China invasion impact me? I may not be a bank, but I may be more susceptible to an attack compared to a bank, because my maturity I may be a 20-year-old company versus a larger bank. So how do I protect myself? I may be more vulnerable. And my expectation of the regulator could be as same of an insurance regulator as a banking regulator. So how do I do that? So how do I prioritize within that? At the same time, I may also have to go down to the minutest detail in terms of some of my employee sitting at some far remote location in Northeast or somewhere, which is a 2-3 member team. And how do I ensure that There's no, you spoke about brand intelligence and brand threats. So there's no reputation risk. There's nothing around brand which is happening out there. So it's an ongoing process. We are learning from it.
Mr. Kodekar, there's a growing trend where employees are being lured into clicking malicious emails to perpetrate attacks, and they're being promised 5 to 10% of the ransomware amount. How do you think threat intelligence can detect such intent, tools, and procedures? What role do you see it playing in detecting the insider threats that are so rampant in the post-pandemic era?
Yeah, it's a very important question which you have asked actually. And employee are the weakest link in this entire chain actually. I will take a little step back to this actually, but we also have to look at that how much digital we are actually going on, and employees are also the one who are actually adapting digital things. There are a lot of initiatives the organizations are taking in terms of the robotic process automations. There are a lot of things which are explicitly meant for doing automation in terms of a lot of processes which are actually manual, and there is a whole game which has been changed from the digital first and mobile first and all those things. So we have seen a lot of traction wherein the organizations are adapting things from the point of view of automation and making the processes faster and easier for their customers. However, the center point of this is employee. The employee are the one who are actually using these technologies. They are actually using the tools and the various mechanism to do this kind of automations and all those things. And the biggest problem is that they are not aware about the technological risk. You're talking about phishing, but that is one of the aspect of it. But I'm just going a little deeper into it. So when take an example of a branch banking executive who is actually using technologies for doing certain things of automation. He might be not aware about what kind of a cybersecurity risk is there or what kind of a technology risk is over there. In terms of any kind of a attack or any kind of a stuff which is happening. So it is very, very important to not to make sure about the employees are aware only about the phishing or the technological point of view where any kind of a threat actor can actually misutilize the things and he can have a targeted attack. But they can actually understand the larger gamut of cybersecurity. They can understand what kind of a cybersecurity risks are there for the organization, for the sector, and for that particular process which they are actually working on. Now, when we talk about a phishing part, or when we talk about the specifically on the employees who are getting targeted specifically from the kind of a phishing and all those things, there are a lot of things which are happening. Like most of the ransomware attacks which has happened in the industry over the period of time, they actually have been compromised with the help of the phishing attacks. So the employees are the one who are actually using this particular email system wherein they are not able to identify whether the phishing attack, this is a phishing attack or there is kind of spear phishing attack is there, and they are actually unknowingly they are opening the mails or they are forwarding.
And there are also these whaling phishing attacks targeting the senior management, and there are kits that are available on the dark web for as little as $7 to enable some of these attacks.
Earlier there were like business compromise attacks which were there, which were on rise, but then slowly and steadily after the awareness things and all those things, employees started understanding what is the DCG and what kind of this kind of attacks. But now the attacker have become so sophisticated that they are making a lot of things which are totally different. They are not actually it's not like simple emails which are they are sending. Actually there are a lot of things which are happening specifically on the email phishing kind of it. So the
they play on your psyche.
Correct. Yeah, they play on your psyche. The attacks are more targeted. They know about the specific behaviors of the employees.
Correct.
Even the employees which are targeted, they knows about in and out of the employee, what the employee does, what is his role, where it works, what kind of a time when he actually check into the office, who is his reporting manager. So a lot of information the threat actors are aware about, and the emails are crafted in such a way that the employee will not be able to understand whether it is a legitimate email or it's really a suspicious or a fraudulent email. So in that case, it has become very easy for the attacker to lure an employee and to make sure that the attack is getting executed. Fortunately, I think we at
how do you see threat intelligence playing a role in averting some of these threats?
Yeah, so there, in my past organization when I used to work in Zurich, actually, I can say actually probably Western world is slightly ahead to us. I can strongly say about this particular word. that they are very much ahead, and their threat intelligence or the kind of things which they have actually used actually for the specifically about understanding how this threat are getting materialized, or how a threat intelligence system can actually identify this thing on a real-time basis. Those are really implemented properly. Wherein our kind of a scenario, we are still at a very initial stage. We are still believing that phishing email campaign for the employees and making it once in a year or twice in a year, and they understand whether it is a phishing email and they are learning. That is a kind of what I can say. It's kind of a little degradation. What I can say. I mean, like still we are saying that okay, we run phishing campaign 4 times in a year. There are 100 employees which are actually falling prey to it. We are giving a training to them, but it's like more about the awareness. But still I can say that you really require to have a strong platform which can actually give you a threat intelligence on a real-time basis, which can actually understand the behavior of the threat actors. As I said about how the threat actors have become more aggressive, they have evolved, they understand the threat scenarios very well, and they target you. So you really require a kind of a platform which can understand these kind of things, and it can actually give you a real-time statistics or the data or the actions to perform immediately. So surprisingly, what I have seen that this is never ending story actually. I mean, like email security is something which is, there are so many of the technologies are coming, the technologies are evolving, but however the threat actors are becoming more and more intelligent, they are becoming more sophisticated, and digital is the aspect which is actually giving them more avenues to actually target.
Right.
So we really require, I mean, like as an industry, we really require to have more kind of brainstorming on this. We really require good solutions which can actually help us to improve on.
Right. So I'll take that thread to Mr. Subramaniam. Mr. Subramaniam, what are the parameters for or the considerations that you would have while selecting a threat intelligence platform? How would you prioritize investment and intelligence in the field of threat intelligence? How do you think banks should walk through that maturity curve? What are the specific things that you would look for in a threat intelligence provider and its platform?
Basic thing is it should be actionable immediately, and it should be compatible, means protocol should be there so that directly it goes into the SOAR and some orchestration happens, and we are able to block IOCs at real time and to stop zero data attacks. That is one thing. And threat intelligence should be it should be widely acceptable, means we should get it from various sources, and we should be able to kind of sieve through the alerts which are coming and action on the right things. So we would like to have a very actionable with high confidence level. Nowadays we get with low confidence, we don't know whether to go ahead with the blocking, whether it will have any business impact. But there should be intelligence which clearly says this vulnerability will be exploited very fast, so you need to immediately close it. So actionable intelligence is what is required. From the other side, I would like to know what kind of threat intelligence you give to countries or states so that things can be blocked at the country's gateway itself. Here, what we are blocking now is at individual enterprise level. What can be done at the national level? What kind of protocols can be there with the threat intelligence service providers and individual countries so that we can have a clean pipe when it comes into our enterprise as such. Then also there should be some follow-up on the threat intelligence provided. It is not only that we need to kind of block it. After we block it, what has happened, whether it has moved from one IP to the other, what are the continuous kind of actions it is expected of the enterprise so that the threat is totally reduced. So these are the things which we are looking at a threat platform. Obviously, the other normal things like compatibility, and there should be trained staff available, easily trainable, user-friendly systems, so that with the lack of current IS resources, the enterprise in the ecosystem, it is very important that things are very easily digestible and easily actionable. And we also have evidence to show that, for example, if some business has been blocked because of this reason, the security team should be able to show or evidence that this has been stopped for this reason, and had we not stopped this, what could have happened? Because most of the time we kind of have the veto power to stop. We don't take a decision based on many business inputs if the confidence level is high in a particular threat intelligence alert. So in that case, we also would require some stories to tell, like what had happened had we not blocked this IP. So these are the things which security practitioner wants from a platform or from a threat intelligence provider.
Right. So I'll take that question to Stefan. Stefan, I have two questions for you based on what Mr. Subramaniam just said. First, do you think the BFSI organizations, have you seen them build the depth to understand, react, and respond to the kind of threat intelligence that providers like Recorded Future give them? And the second question I'll ask you later. First, you answered this one.
Yeah. First of all, and I think you touched on that, I think your sector is the most mature by far. It's if you look at others like that we engage with, like the manufacturing side, for example, they are so far behind, both in terms of their internal maturity and, in fact, they never share information. We have cases where we've had CISOs who have been attacked, and they have asked their CEOs to go out and talk about it because they think they want to educate their peers, but they have been brutally stopped.
Also, the media glare on those sectors is not as much.
Right. No. So I think So you in that sense represent the thought leaders in this. I wanted to comment. I think you said an important thing about at the national level. So we are very proud today that we are providing threat intelligence to 26 national certs worldwide. Again, I would say there is a big difference in maturity in those certs as well. And in particular, I would say with how they interact with their local, both government agencies and industries, and I honestly don't know. We are providing it to the Indian National Cert. I don't really know how they work, but, being a Swede, I can say that I'm not very impressed by the Swedish National Cert. When I get alerts from them, it's usually a week after we have sent it out from our systems, so that's major embarrassment. So much for Sweden, yeah. Israel, I think, is one of the prime examples. Their national cert and security organization is working extremely tightly protecting their companies. So I see them as somewhat of a thought leader there in how they do that. Of course, it's a small country, so it's an easier task. Being the national cert for India is a humongous task, of course, both in terms of just the sheer size, but also as we see the number of threats you have from surrounding countries, for example. So I think it's a very important question, and something which people should encourage, not only how the certs work internally, but also how the different national certs collaborate and share information with each other. On the European side, we have seen some attempts to do that, but I would say there's still a long way to go there.
Right. The other very critical point that Mr. Subramaniam touched upon was the lack of security skills. Now, as it is, there is a lack of security skills, and once they have any certifications or new courses, then just like that, they're gone. So threat intelligence would require you to build capabilities in-house so that, they can build these honeypot networks to understand, to lure the attackers and then understand what their TTPs are. But all of this comes at a big price. So does Recorded Future also provide people support and skills apart from threat intelligence? And how is it that you can help BFSI companies obviate some of these challenges around people skills and skill shortage?
Right. So I should say, first of all, we are really focusing, as I mentioned, on the automation part, providing the best possible intelligence in a fully automated way. We do not try to sell services as such, but when we set up, we decided we would never do that. After a while, we realized that we at least needed to help many customers to bootstrap their threat intelligence organizations. So today we have, of our total employees, which is about 800, more than 100 are what we call intelligence services, which are really our customer success people. So they assist in the onboarding and they do regularly quarterly reviews of how people are using our products. And of course, they share tips and tricks. So that's one aspect. The other one is, as I mentioned, we have our own analyst organization, about 50 people. So they both work on doing analytic work, which we share with all our clients, but we also actually have what we call an analyst on demand. So our clients and anyone actually can come and ask them for assistance. So typically when they jump in is if someone has had, for example, an incident and they don't understand how to use threat intelligence to work with that. So we are, let me emphasize, we are not an incident response service company. We recommend others that they can work with on that, but we help them how they can use threat intel in the incident response process. But we also do have our analysts help the clients do, for example, strategic reports, to understand trends. What are the trends in how the threat actors are evolving? Are there sort of industry segment or geographical trends which are critical? And we take pride, as I said, in sharing this information very openly. So again, very often our clients are happy. Some client might actually sponsor a study, but we then share it with everyone in the community.
Right. Now, Mr. Mungle, in your previous response, you spoke about understanding what data to use and how to use it. So when we talk about threat intelligence, the general tendency is to gather a lot of data and then try and understand how to crack the code or conundrum of that data. So information regurgitation and that data exhaustion is a realistic challenge around threat intelligence. How do you think organizations should deal with that challenge?
So first and foremost thing, when it comes to threat intel, it is a raw data.
Correct.
It is something which is generated for use by any and every organization at a very large spectrum. Now, each organization should understand what do they want out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a heavy 500-page book.
Correct.
You read what you want to read from it. If you start from the first page and go up to the last page, most of the effort would be fruitless because you won't get what you want out of it.
So contextualizing itself it to your business environment.
Correct. And what is required by the business.
Correct.
Now, the second thing is information overload.
Mm-hmm.
Any organization should avoid information overload.
Right.
If you decide to work with 3 or 4 or 5 sources, the likelihood is that at least 40 to 50 or sometimes more percentage of the information would be duplicated.
Mm-hmm.
And which will add an overhead on you to normalize that information, or you will end up doing 2 or 3 times the same thing because you don't have time to normalize that information. And that is one thing which I would really look forward from any threat intel platform to provide the kind of a confidence that this whatever I'm giving is normalized. You don't have to worry. We are not missing out on anything.
Okay.
And the third thing is they should also know to take a practical angle. In our organization, what we do is we don't go by out of the box or off the shelf use cases. We study our environment, we do an initial assessment, research, and arrive at what use cases we want out of it. So we have more than 70% of our use cases which are custom made for ourselves.
Okay.
We only use 30% of use cases which come out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important because use cases are not one size fit all kind of a thing. You need to understand, and that reduces a lot of pressure of handling information.
Mm-hmm.
Because the use case itself would eliminate so much of information that is not required.
Absolutely.
So this is how we can do it, but there is no right answer to it. You have to keep on researching, you have to keep on trying.
Mm-hmm.
And one more thing, as I was tempted to say this when Shailendra was also talking. One more thing is that this threat intel provides you with a lot of IOCs,
mm-hmm.
and you keep on updating it. In last 2 years, one of the biggest challenges when you keep on blocking those IOCs, the device itself runs out of capacity.
Yeah.
For example, in firewall, you cannot block more than 50,000 IPs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have virtual firewalls, then God save you. You can't go beyond a particular time. Mm-hmm. It becomes very necessary that you should also know when to unblock them.
Absolutely.
And to know that you can't do it yourself,
mm-hmm.
that's where, organizations like Recorded Future can provide. Mm-hmm. So like threat intel of what to block is given. Similarly, a reverse threat intel of what can be unblocked should also be accompanied with
Would
it
you
on
have
a
a
regular
solution?
basis.
I mean, I think I mentioned that before. So that's why what we do is we publish daily lists of everything. So we're essentially saying that we give you the up to date. If a command server has not been responsive for a couple of days, as you say, no need to block that. So I think that's, it's like all this information. It's so much real time that you need to have here, and to understand when threats age out is equally important.
Yeah, the process is required to take care of it, because ultimately blocking is something like, people go and do it instantly.
Correct.
Unblocking is something which is a leisurely activity, and that time never comes.
Right.
So that is also one of the things which I think is very important from the point of view of handling a huge amount of information.
Right. Mr. Tavadia, you have a very matured SOC implementation within the country, and a quite advanced one. Now, threat hunting is a key part of threat intelligence. It helps you know whether you've already been compromised. So how do you see SecOp intelligence enabling the enterprise to do better, effective, timely threat hunting?
I don't think we are nothing. It's like an advanced thing. It's like you do what you do today. What you did yesterday was not relevant. So it is nothing like, I would say it's advanced threat hunting. It's like every day you are learning things. So it's like 24/7, always alert teams are there. Anything which is unusual or not. So many a times there are people who come and say there are so many cases out there. So what we call is the false positives. Okay. So how do you analyze this false positives? Because there are, like you also said, many times we get these alerts which are thrown up by the system, and they're more than 70% of the time they are false positives. So again, it's a learning. So it's just an experience. There is no, I would say, tool or.
How do you make it more effective? And
it's just like effective in the sense it's a knowledge. There's no tool, I would say. It's just that practice. The team which has gathered, that's why you mentioned about, and that's the biggest problem what we have is the experience. Once you train some guys, and now he doesn't have to refer to any tool to tell you whether it's fake or like now he's humanly also he's seen these cases repeating again and again, and they're coming as a false positives. One of the things is like we train the model again. That's one of the areas that, like you mentioned, of unblocking. One of the cases is when you're getting constant false positives, you have to tune that you don't stop giving this alert itself. Because that is the way we try and tune the thing. So there is no, I would say, one policy or one tool. It's just that over the years, it is just by doing and practicing, it is, you'll achieve it. There's nothing, I would not say any scientific approach, or we have never followed it. It is just gut feel, and out of the, like standing on the floor, what you feel right, we just do it. You don't try, because getting some opinion and all that, we just don't do that. We just do what we feel it's wrong. Let us get to it, because ultimately it's our, like you always said, it's our rules. We know best. No OEMs will be able to tell us what rules to write and write. So since we know, we said, okay, fine. Maximum what will happen is it will block something. Now we know what you have put the rule. So we wait for next 5 days, 10 days. There are no alerts. Nobody is shouting. Then you've not done anything wrong. So actually, we are playing live with fire. I mean, there is no here. This is one case where there is nothing like a UAT.
So is there a way we can put a method to this madness?
No, that's something. There is nothing. There is no method over. This is like we have to put live fire. This is the only area I would say where is nothing like a UAT.
So it's firefighting.
Yeah, there is directly always on production. See, normally, if you're developing a software, you'll have a software lifecycle, development, UAT, QA will sign off for all those things. Here is nothing. You're facing the bullet. Okay. You can't have, I'll fret, you throw me a trial bullet, I'll fend, and if I die, you're dead.
But could you classify it into red, amber, green, or basis some customization, because
how they can operationalize it.
You could do that. I was actually sitting here when you talked about the false positive handling, and of course there will always be false positives. Otherwise, you set your threshold wrong.
Yeah.
But I was sitting here thinking that I bet among you as a team here, you probably have people who are sitting every day handling the same false positives. So one of the visions I have, and this is going into the future, is actually to be seeing that as again a collaborative effort. If you have like our user base today, and we do have sort of default rules, and people write their own rules. For the default rules, which are very common among a large number of users, it would be wonderful as a way of reducing the load if it would be enough that one of your guys sees that this is a false positive and marks it as that. Then you could maybe not eliminate it, but at least reduce the severity of scoring of that for your guys, so that you could, in a collaborative manner, actually help handle some of these. Of course, there are individual differences. You could not do this throughout, but I think it's another example where we could actually, as a community, do more things together.
Because one of the reasons that challenges that you will face, Mr. there are not standard APIs to push those rules into your devices. Like, for example, if you are using QRadar, you need to write it separately. If you are using a Splunk, you'll have to write it separately. So unfortunately, the OEM stacks have, and that's what I've been trying to push and I'll ask people is, like you said, you are giving a threat intel. Now, if I were to make a rule and push it, I'll have to manually wait and feed and write the rule or write a connector or get it customized for every OEM.
No, and you're quite right. I mean, and that is, of course, a clear sign of the immaturity of the market that you don't have, we have taxi and a few other standards now for some levels. Yeah. But as you say, out into the API, into the different products, there are no standards. So,
At least I would like to add what we do is, we have decided one thing. On threat intelligence, we will not use human intelligence. Because if you use human intelligence, you are tempted to cut short something. You're tempted to eliminate something based on I know everything kind of a thing.
But then how do you handle the whole information overload?
Just consume it.
All of it.
And then depending on, as he said, if something stops working, analyze it.
But then that's by exception. I mean, in some sense.
Yeah, so that's what I said. There is no. It's just an experience. Honestly, I don't want to say anything else because it's just that doing, then only mature it. That's why I would say we don't say it's matured, but we say it is more experienced. I would say it is just that because there is
experience-driven exercise.
It's a manual thing, and you need a team to do that, and that's where the biggest challenge is, to have that consistent team. They don't deliver.
And over a period of time, the process sets down that it becomes a repetitive, routine task kind of a thing. So, pain is initial.
Yeah, but always the fear I have is we should not miss the woods for the trees. And I mean, because the teams are thinking in a particular way. So the advantage of having a non-attrition continuous team is they will deal with it the way they would have dealt with it a few months back.
Yes.
And if I get an outside-in perspective, someone else to observe, be a fly on the wall and tell me barabar kar rahe nahi, doing it right or not, I don't know. So that's the whole.
See, these are the two sides of the coin. I would say but that's why I said earlier also, you need to have your own critics. Like that's what we also have it within the team itself. Like if there's one technology, the other guy will criticize.
I think it's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, so it's just that you balance it out because you can't be changing the team. That's very dangerous. But rather, it's a healthy criticism, a healthy debate with the team. So in our SOC room, many a time there's huge arguments. Nothing has happened outside, but just people of some mind one is something went wrong. But actually, it's just that people are emotionally getting charged and getting to debate. So that's why you create that fire. That's why.
See, what I fear most is what I don't know. So what's happening behind the scene, and as you said, we will deal with it only if some noise comes. So if no noise comes and there are some threat actors behind the scenes working quietly, we don't know.
You can't
how it will manifest into.
That is life. I would say.
Layered security.
Layered security. You can't be 100%.
It cannot be 60-70%.
Yeah.
At least 90%, 95% you will reach.
reach. Like for example, this our regulators have given us a maturity index. So many a times when we have reached that at the 90%, when you say, they say, why are you not 100%? I have no answer. I said, I'll never be 100%. So even from so what will it take you? Give it in writing, how many years, how much? I said, nothing, you can never reach 100%. But somehow our regulators feel it's like a mark sheet score, right? So you are 85, no, 85, like parents who are never satisfied with their children, like, no, okay, you want to get to the 100%, Same our regulators, why are you not, from last 3 years, 4 years, you're showing only 92%. So this time I made it 92.5. He said, oh, just
So you partially, I think, answered my question, but I was wondering, do you feel that your regulators understand how to approach it? No?
Very simple answer.
No, but I gave a very different answer. Same thing, same story last year. So I told my chairman, the day you see 100 over here, you fire me because I'm lying to you. So
I think the regulators are fairly maturing quite fast. What I'm saying, because today there is a separate cell, there is a separate amount of investments.
Right.
Yeah.
Fintechs and innovation.
I think the way I see it,
Yeah.
the overheads that are coming through, they are seeking assurances. The regulators are they seek assurances. They don't want to come into the operational capabilities. But they seek assurances to say that how well do you know your ecosystem? How well do you know what you do?
Yeah.
So a lot of that is self-certification, and then they constantly say, checkpoint it with an external to try and make sure that you are what you are, and you're being told that you are in the same space. So I think these are, I would say, that evolutionary approaches that is coming through. But to this point, I think if you look in the last 5 to 6 years, there's been significant. Today, like we all set up a national critical infrastructure, right? There's a national critical infrastructure entity which essentially makes sure that they are on top of you. And there is fair bit of data that keeps flowing through.
Yeah.
But it also adds overheads, no doubt about it, but it does. So which means that there is a mandated entity which essentially is under the purview of the government of India to be able to help you with this. So I think there is fair bit of awareness, a fair bit of investments, and fair bit of, I would say, increased governance being pushed in to the regulated entities.
But I'm glad to hear that you say it's actually helping in a constructive way.
It will, because because the way they seek the assurances makes you do it. You can't be lethargic, let's put it bluntly, right? The way they put it across are the key KPIs and the KRIs that come in. I think it makes you sit back and think through as to why is this question being asked in the first place, right? It is very easy for you to respond or a reaction coming in, hey, this is too much. But you sit back and go through it and say, why is these questions being asked? And you put yourself into that shoes. Maybe it's a slightly different view that comes up. But yes, there is always a plus to everything.
I have seen a very positive side to the regulators. So, for example, in India, you don't have a single regulator. You have different sectoral regulators. So, for example,
For every
Mahesh,
subsector.
there would be the Reserve Bank. For us, there would be the insurance authority. But what we are seeing increasingly is, even if there's a difference of maturity between the regulators, for example, in India, the insurance regulator is only 20 years old versus the banking regulator, who's there since ages. But now we're seeing they're going up the maturity curve. They're sharing best practices. So the cyber security guidelines of the bank would be similar for an insurance company. Now that makes things difficult for entities like us, because now there's a sudden push. And maybe we were every day walking for 10 minutes and now there's an expectation to run a marathon, a full-scale marathon. But
it's good for you.
It's good for us, it's good for the customer, it's good for the industry.
For the ecosystem.
For the ecosystem, because if they don't push us, we may really not invest in that direction. So a bit of push is needed because self-regulation is still not there. And hence a lot of these regulations are not principle-based regulations, but very prescriptive. And when they are prescriptive, then obviously it becomes slightly difficult. But then you're working in a box, you want to give what they're expecting. So yeah, it has both pros and cons, but at least directionally they have been very supportive. And for them, cyber is one of the top risks in their mind. So any conversation which happens, it starts with cyber.
Absolutely, because it's very core to the existence of your business,
Absolutely.
the BFSI.
And they do understand something like a cyber terrorism. They have quite a few people who have joined from the private industry, and not everyone might be a career bureaucrat. So things are evolving, things are changing.
It's a national prerogative also now.
Right.
A number of digital transactions are just exponentially growing, and therefore it's a national prerogative to take care that the trust level is there and the assurance is there, as you said, within the organization, and there is trust among the users, the end customers.
Right.
So that the platform is fine and we can transfer
It's
money.
all about the digital trust.
Yeah, digital trust, which is there. That
Correct,
is
correct.
important, that is happening.
Right. Mr. Subramanian, there's another challenge that I want to discuss with you. Banks have typically invested in network security, endpoint security, and cyber security in general. But there is a lack of visibility and observability across all these siloed parts of security. How do you think banks should deal with this challenge of security and lack of visibility through their attack surface intelligence and the vulnerability intelligence?
See, banks have been there in this digital business for long now. So there are legacy systems at different points of time, investments have happened. And the cybersecurity framework, which has come maybe 2017, I think, from the RBI, which gave the basic fundamental foundation for all banks to follow. So because of that, there were interventions by all the boards, all bank boards, to invest on various kinds of solutions, like let's say DLP, you have an NAC solution. All these were mandated by the regulator, very active and very proactive regulator who put in place so that these digital transactions can take place. What is now happening in the last 2 years, maybe because of the pandemic, the number of transactions happened. This could be possible because of the foundation which came up in the cybersecurity framework, which was kind of mandated by the regulator. And that was mandated through the boards of the banks. It did not come as a kind of guideline or something like that, but it came as a mandate to the board that they need to comply within these timelines. So that way, some kind of standard security is available across the banks now. But as this happened internally in an enterprise, banking enterprise, the banking perimeter changed now. Now we are connected to our corporate, we are connected to another cooperative banks. Now the banking is now happening there. Now our weakest point is the security of the customer rather than the security of the enterprise itself. Now how do we secure them, or what kind of protocols we should have, like this OTP and things like that, where we take care of the security or the authentication mechanism of the customer. So there, as somebody said, as Mr. Mahesh said, that the fraud risk also comes into play. We need to study the behavior of every customer, and if there is any outlier behavior, then we need to take action against that. All that is coming into play. That also again is mandated by the regulator. So all these coming into play, this ecosystem has been built now. So now I think we can, the growth in digital transactions will happen, and some assurance to the management and trust to the customers. These two are going parallelly. As far as threat intelligence is concerned, it's more towards how do I take care that there is no command and control center which is taking total control. Recently, there was a cooperative bank in Hyderabad where a threat actor had kind of penetrated into the network of the cooperative bank. He stayed there for a couple of days. He could get the entire password of the database administrator.
A silent attack.
he could also put in the balances in the accounts, and he could withdraw money from various channels because he kind of had total control of the network of the bank. As I again said, they may not be directly regulated by RBI. Just now recently they got under the regulation of RBI. Earlier they were not regulated by them. So there also, as I told, this perimeter has expanded to these kind of corporates. Now the fraud risk management is becoming an important piece through which security is also playing a part in this.
Right.
Earlier
Even
we
if
were
your
more interested in
security posture
the...
is high, you need to ensure that your ecosystem partners and the customers, if they let in some sort of a threat into you, then...
And this also is true for supply chain attacks. Then we are now totally dependent on in many ways. We are dependent on fintech companies, partners, their ecosystem. They use the cloud, public cloud. So it's becoming, so many dependencies are there. We are having a partner. The partner is using AWS for storing the data. So our customer data gets stored there.
Yeah.
Now, how do we take care of the security there?
That's the problem of dispersed interconnected systems.
Yeah, it's an interconnect. Yeah, and this regulation is not very cut and right in that. Means we'll have a global statement saying that your customer data is your responsibility. You'll have to secure them. But in these circumstances where not all customer data is totally under your control, now because of peers and kind of business expansion, nearly all banks take up partners with fintech companies.
And then that becomes your weakest link.
That could become a weakest. I'm not saying that is the weakest link. That could
there
be
is a
one of the.
possibility of it.
That is one more place where we need to secure the data.
Build up your defense.
Build up a second infrastructure.
Correct. Right. That's an interesting point. Mr. Ramamurthy, would you like to comment on what Mr. Subramaniam just said? How are you tackling that piece? And also, then I have another interesting question for you, a technology-specific question. How do you see that risk playing out with the ecosystem playing?
So I think the way we all are moving across is there is always this risk of where do you draw the line, right? In every 6 months or 3 months, you actually moving the edge a bit further. It is important that at the end of the day, your policy and your expectations, that is, the bank as a regulated entity, have the kind of, I would say, framework that essentially gives them that level of comfort and their risk appetite. What's obviously, to Mr. Subramaniam's point, is of utmost importance to say that you need to know what's the kind of data. So you need to know your data. And that's a big challenge. Let me be upfront. It's not an easy stuff. You need to know your data. And within the data, you need to know where the data has to be in play and how the data is in play. So to us, I think that becomes a fair bit of debate and discussions when we go into any kind of partnerships, right? So whether it is companies, fintechs, ecosystems, and newer players coming into the game. So there is a fair bit of healthy debate that happens to say what we control, what we will not control. And this is within a framework. That gives us certain contours of what we need to manage. Otherwise, being overtly concerned about the unknowns is just going to kill you. It's all about saying what you know and keep knowing you're better, and you need to know what you have to expand further. So I think to that extent, as long as the boundaries and this thing is understood, there is, I would say, a fair big degree of control that we exercise. There is always a debate, are we secure? The answer is always, we try to be secure. Not that we are, we try to be secure. And which also means that a lot of, today the regulator is also expecting certain things to happen in that space. I think that to us, the force of the regulator, the force of the Indian laws coming in, as well as awareness of the customers to a large extent helps. And more importantly, the simplicity of what you do. Now today, all of us are in a bit of a rat race to say that we do Me Too everywhere. Especially in a
the
banking
sector of
fraternity, we
BFSI
do a lot of Me Toos.
It's a sector of early
we do.
adopters and equally fast followers.
So I think somewhere, that's my personal opinion, it's not a bank's, but it's the opinion says, keep it simple, create a decent experience, and make sure that what you do is enables the customer through a non-repudiatable approach. To that extent, you can control. And if you're doing it with a partner, make sure that he or she understands what you're trying to do. Yes, I think it's evolving. So we are obviously in that journey always. It's never a full stop to it.
It's a race without a finish line. So there's another technology aspect that I wanted to touch upon with you. Now, there's a lot of talk around threat analytics, use of AI, ML, NLP, image recognition for effective and improved threat intelligence. How do you see it helping in terms of finding potential threats and in terms of understanding the new risks that might evolve?
So it's a very, I would say, loaded question. The reason I say is that...
Do you think it's actually happening, or is it just another
I would say it is still evolving,
technologies?
because to me, the question that really comes about is, the core question is understanding what is AI/ML. Sometimes, many attempts, because it gets misconstrued and presented multiple ways. It's an easy sale, but a tough ask to implement, the way I put it. Right? Being a technologist, I sometimes question a lot of the folks who come in front. There's a buzzword. The buzzword doesn't necessarily mean it is actual there. So the way I possibly would play it out is, I would say the banks, a lot of the banks with the digital evolution that is happening, need to have far more robust risk understanding and risk management process, which has to move up the ladder very fast, because the gap that I would see is, how do you act and how do you react to manage those risks in the face of an evolving ecosystem coming in? Now, data is available. Data is in plenty. To be able to analyze the data meaningfully with whatever tool sets that are available and making sense of it is most important. So you have a bits and bytes, you have the next layer of information. The information can create knowledge, and then the knowledge can create analytics. But first thing is to understand that. And to be able to get that right vis-a-vis your risk postures and create those right kind of tool sets takes time.
Where is your bank in this journey?
I think we are in that journey of having fairly understood our data and creating more intelligence out of that data. How we are evolving our risk framework fairly aggressively, because we've been probably ahead in the digital transaction journey, having been in this ecosystem, especially in the digital payments journey, fairly ahead. And since we do process fairly, I would say, in the upwards of the 20% to 30% of the national's payment in infrastructure. So you're pretty there. But it's important to keep the data, link threats coming in, link the security environments into your risk framework. And then try to see a much more holistic view. It has to evolve. There is never I keep saying, there is never a halt to it. You have to evolve. So that's the journey that a bank, if any bank agrees to that journey, I think it will be far more mature. And then it knows where it has to keep moving itself. I think that's what we're doing. I think we're doing in that space. It's always, like you rightfully said, where do you balance? Business versus spend versus control versus the kind of risk frameworks that you put in, right? And the governance associated with it. There's always a yin and yang around it.
Absolutely.
And we have to balance it every day. And it's every year, every day, that's continuous.
Correct. Mr. Tolia, how are you looking at this risk framework, and how do you see analytics and ML playing a role here?
So, while I'll come to your question and answer that, I have got one question which has been playing at the back of my mind throughout this discussion. We have been talking about protecting our organization, right? Our internal external stakeholders. But is there any way we can also look at our customers if there is any pattern in that compromise and getting a early alert? So, we need to somewhere be looking at how we are going to identify a risk pattern that is getting played over and over again. Because, I'm not really worried about the customer getting compromised. It might be insufficient digital education. But there would be even digitally savvy customers getting compromised. And that pattern we need to build up to know that, yes, there is something systemically we can do. That's one part. The other part is how we are going to, there are many times which I'm sure some of us would have experienced system to system integration across causing losses because, there were timeouts at the other end which were detected by the customers and, they were leveraging those timeouts to do frauds. And it is only a fraud monitoring system or a customer complaint which then identifies that there has been a leakage, or at times there is a reconciliation team which comes out with a disparity which you have to look at. So I'm saying one is the set of cyber threats, another is the set of people who have exploited your systemic flaws that also need to be looked at. Finally, at the end of the day, the system, and good or bad, people or the hackers have a habit of flouting about it. So if we can, hear that whispers, that would help us be better prepared. So that's probably one thing. If Stefan has anything in those lines to help us understand how our customers are getting impacted. Finally, that's what we owe it to them. Right?
Interesting questions on the sort of, as you said, the dangerous individuals here. I think first of all, I mean it's a hairy territory to get into because it touches a lot on personal integrity and so on. But we've actually been one of our strategic initiatives since about a year ago is to get better at identity in general. And when we say identity now, we don't only think about not only an email and a credential. It's actually building a richer digital picture footprint of an individual. Specifically, for example, to be able to identify what you could call risky behavior. You could, if you look at an individual and you can see the patterns, how they are, for example, which platforms are they on? And we've seen cases on the corporate side where you have individuals who have consistently been, first of all, we can see proof in data lakes that they're using their professional email address in all kinds of other places where they shouldn't. So those kind of things, you could actually identify and advise on. But again, it's an interesting challenge, and again something which is different over the world in what you're allowed to do from a personal integrity point of view. So EU, for example, with GDPR has its challenges. It's definitely not helping to prevent that kind of behavior or to detect that kind of behavior. But I think again, you're right. I mean, the end customers are part of the attack surface, right? So you really need to have some way of monitoring them and being able to assess. And again,
last mile security.
Yeah. No, and the same thing as you said with your integration partners. I think the third party risk or the supply chain risk, whatever you prefer to call it, is increasingly becoming an issue. I don't have any simple answer to that. The other part you had about how to detect, the inconsistencies in systems and so on.
But I'm sure there are some overall global patterns which can be looked at to help customers go up the digital literacy. And probably this would be especially true for corporate customers who deal or who transact at a very large scale.
Yeah.
So the compromise of the cooperative bank that were discussed, these were very high value transactions. So if we can somehow, educate them and forewarned is forearmed, would help our customers have a safe operating environment with their awareness.
No, I think it's probably one of the better investments you could do actually to help them. Can I have a comment on the AI question before? So I think I'm an old AI researcher myself, and And first of all, I think, it's a terrible term, AI. One part, I think, is that today everyone is sort of equalizing AI to machine learning. I think there's a lot of credit to old-fashioned rule-based systems. So one example in our system, when we do our risk scoring, we could have built a fancy deep learning system for that, but we're actually using a rule-based system. The primary reason is that we think our users, the analysts, they are not satisfied with a black box providing risk. So they like to have a rule-based system where we can actually give explanations to why something has been assessed to have a high risk. So I think too much today people are equalizing AI and ML. The other one part I think there is the fact that, as I see it, AI is used in two widely different ways. One is for automation, just to sort of handle routine tasks which humans do extremely well, but it's just too costly, they don't have time. And the other one is augmentation, where we use, for example, deep learning to go beyond human capacity in terms of analyzing complex data. I think on the augmentation side, we are in the extremely early stages. We've built some models, for example, to do predictive risk scoring of things. They work well, but they are still very, very sort of baby steps. On the automation side, I think there is a lot of potential in freeing up capacity on the human analysts to automate the routine tasks. We did one thing which we just launched, is that we automated the process of deciding if a potential typo squat domain was actually malicious. And we're doing that by combining natural language processing and image detection. So what we do now is when we see a candidate typo squat or candidate phishing page, we take a screenshot and we run automated logotype detection and text analytics on it. So we can actually exactly mimic the process that a human analyst would do. And that's helping the clients we have using that now tremendously in reducing the number of cases they have to sit and manually go. We can actually prioritize for them. So I think that's a good example how you can get away from some of the alert fatigue by automating the routine tasks. Yeah. And I think that's sort of one of the key things here is figuring out where do you put your efforts into automating things which are big time sinks today, but they are actually not too sophisticated for the algorithms to assist with.
Right, to add to what you're saying, the challenge that we normally have on the AI side is the position. There is no point in the way I keep saying to my OEMs or partners, you don't come and sell me a product which you believe has capability.
Help me try a solution within the environment that we operate, because that's when the results are going to come.
Like a use case approach?
Yeah, take the use case approach, because at the end of the day, you may have some brilliant piece of code, but you may have some very brilliant models put in. But the ability of those models to essentially overlay on the bed of our data, on their company's data is very important. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, your results could be awry. Right? It's completely awry.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times, that's the biggest one. On a standalone basis with this thing, it could be great. But when you really start to propagate it into the ecosystem of the customer and still make meaningful sense out of it is important. Now, that's where I keep conflicting within myself. Because to me, that's when the money is, the bang for the buck is going to be. Right? Mm-hmm. That's when you're going to create efficiency. That's why you're going to create lowered risk profiling. And that's, if anyone comes in with that viewpoint, probably he or she understands it better, is the way I see it.
Mr. Kothawale, security breaches in the BFSI sector can have a very domino effect. But often there is a tendency within companies to brush it under the carpet, and there is not too much of an information sharing and collaboration that's happening around all the intelligence. But the bad guys are doing a very good job of collaborating. So how do you think there can be effective information sharing, intelligence sharing, collaboration within the BFSI sector, internally, externally? How do you see it play out?
A very good question. So one thing I want to admit is I was not knowing that the threat actors collaborate in such a manner, and you are able to hear what's happening. So that's something I'm taking away, one of the key takeaways, because I thought they're operating in silos, and that makes things much difficult for us. The sum of parts could be much more lethal, and I don't think we are collaborating to that extent. When I say we, I humbly also say that including any of our organizations, because the first thing is you are prepared for an eventuality. You know now it's a matter of when and not if, because obviously more your digital footprint, more your presence, more you do business, more you are visible, more your brand. At some point of time, whatever tools you put in, whatever security posture you adopt, you are vulnerable to get compromised. I think it's a maturity. I don't know. So one of the questions which was asked at one of our board meetings was that in case there's a real ransomware attack, touchwood, we have not been faced with it yet, but I mean, in terms of any of our key senior executives, how would you react to it? Do you have a standard protocol? And obviously, our standard protocol we have, but what will happen on the ground could differ because of the way it could pan out. And depending on who's the victim, as you say at the end of it. Would you pay? Would you compromise? Would you do what? Would you report? Luckily, we have not been at the end of it, but I think we have geared up our board and our management to say that if there's something which is happening, we will go and we will report to certain, etc. We'll share our examples with others so that they can learn from it. But when it actually happens, whether we'll do it or not, I think only time will tell. We have to go through it.
Risk.
There is a reputation risk, to be fair. But at least can we, in a closed group, so for example, the insurance CISOs, insurance CROs, we have a closed group and we do share information. There could be near
informal sharing of.
So there's no formal sharing. Obviously, you have to report to the sector regulator, you have to report to certain and whatever other protocols which are there. There's no formal way of sharing. No one would want to bear the reputation, and I think that's where we need to take baby steps. We need to come together and not judge people in terms of incidents which have happened. I don't know if it happens in banking or other sectors.
Banks do have a
informal.
No, there's a formal regulated by IDRBT, and they have a group for exactly solving this problem. That if one bank is hit, probably the next bank is on the way.
Yeah. So I think so. You need to. But is there an obligation on them to share?
Yes. Banks will call out, and it's more from an educative thing rather than to pinpoint or anything. It's just more from a
clearly prescribed time limits. Within 2 hours, within 6 hours.
No, so that's to the sector regulator. That's to certain.
No, that's
but
from
is it also to the industry
once
group?
it goes to RBI,
they will
RBI
calls for a
share
meeting.
it with the other bank.
They
In
call
fact,
for a
they
meeting.
give out an advisory that this has happened in this bank.
Sure.
Therefore, you need to take these precautions.
But,
RBI is very proactive.
Yeah.
So maybe so if the common body is the sector regulator, then maybe we might also have that. It's not yet, but we are aware of a few players who got compromised, but they have not shared. And so I think we need to work more in that direction. There have been some baby steps being taken, but we still need to do a bit more. And I'll also say that it also depends on the maturity of the industry and how much digitally focused, etc. they are. But now I think we are maturing very fast because of post-COVID. Everyone is now going digital. Everyone understands cyber. The boards are asking. So I think we'll move in that direction. I'm quite positive about that. At least for us as an organization, I think we have made that mental shift that let's share, so I'll give you another example. I also handle fraud whistleblowing in my organization. There is always the constant debate that if a particular incident has happened, do you name and shame and do you circulate it across to all employees? Let's assume there's a sales conduct behavior in a particular organization. There are enough people who say that don't take names, don't share the names, don't share the incident in such a detail that people who don't know might end up practicing it. And then there are enough people who also say that please share it so that you're preempting, you are preventing it from happening. So we don't know. So it all depends on
So
how.
there are cultural barriers and
There are cultural.
organizational mindsets.
There are cultural barriers, and some of these mindsets I think are breaking. So we are positively moving in that direction. But yeah, it just takes one incident and then we'll know how does it happen. But yeah, so that's one part of it. What was your other question? Sorry,
That was the question.
That was the
Information
question.
sharing, how do you see it?
I also had one feedback or one input. Your name is Recorded Future, and I was speaking with the team also in terms of how did it come. So you're recording everything and all things possible for the future. Some of your tools are based on behaviors, based on trends, what you listen, and then you share with us. You also spoke about predictive capabilities. So I think if some of the reports which you give have some level of predictive patterns to it, it will be very helpful. So for example, you spoke of domino effect and you spoke. So if there is a second or a third line impact somewhere which is happening. So for example, if something happens in banking, next expected is insurance. If I get some input about it, it will be great. So for example, Amit spoke about phishing mails. I'll give you an example. A few days back, we had specific targeted phishing where the CEO's name was used, and obviously the email ID was something different. But it was such an intelligent email and it targeted such an intelligent community. It was to simple email saying, I'm trying to reach you, you're not reachable. It's the year end, why are you not picking up my phone? Quickly send me a WhatsApp. Few people fell prey to it in spite of all yearly awareness campaigns and etc. Few people actually shared their WhatsApp number. Then the scene or the battleground moved from the digital domain to on the ground. So now you had people exchanging WhatsApp. When we tried to later investigate, we found that maybe the SIM card was cloned or the WhatsApp number was compromised, and then people were asking money.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm laughing because we've seen
It's such
that.
a big industry. It's almost like a cottage industry on the dark web now. The ransomware as a service.
Yeah.
We had one of our clients actually who was,
And they also give you negotiators to negotiate with the company.
Yeah. So we reached out to the phone number immediately, and we came to know he's a poor sweeper at some at Juhu Beach. He doesn't know his phone has been compromised. It's being used and money is being asked. So if I can get an alert saying that such level of phishing emails have increased, and I'm just speaking as I'm thinking, maybe I could up my filters. Maybe I could.
I think that's a good example actually of where we don't have the reporting, because those kind of incidents are typically not reported in formal channels, and that's where I think sharing between communities is going to be important. I'm laughing because we
So at least I made an attempt.
we had a client who was also affected by this same kind of scam, and as one of the guys I talked to said, the only reason they didn't fall for it was because it was a polite ending to the email, and my boss would never send such a polite ending to the email.
So we'll move into a quick wrap up. Any cultural mindset shift or any cultural barriers that you think should break within your organization? What is it that you want changed within your organization to enable better threat intelligence? If each of you could give quick sound bites, we'll start with you, Mr. Davadia.
No, it's a constant education because cultural, it is still today, even today after, like I said, even after so many things, it is not even considered an IT. See, forget we said business. Even if you talk in IT, now InfoSec is, earlier IT was the the
Custodian of security.
no, it was called a villain. Like no network guy. Now the CISO is the new villain. Like no, in the organization.
That's where the buck stops.
Yeah. So even the IT guy, the CIO will say, "You don't tell me this CISO fellow is creating all this problem." So it's even within the IT. Frankly, this kind of culture.
That
division has started. So it has to be. It has to start from top down. If it starts from the board downwards, the culture starts.
So identifying it as a business risk instead of just a
security risk. So and we started this, and now like even in every board meeting we have a comment. There's a CISO comes and gives a complete presentation to the board and question being asked by the board. So what are we doing? Why are you doing? And they themselves are now scared and they're asking intelligent questions. I mean, like no, earlier it was just okay. Now at least when you ask questions, so that's where you come to know now they're also equally tech savvy. Equally in the same.
And informed.
Like, that's because they are now attending multiple boards in everywhere the same topic comes up also. Right.
Mr. Mungle.
Yeah, so I would say my journey in security started somewhere way back in 1998. And the very first thing that I learned about security was that's a conflict between control and convenience.
Correct.
And today, after so many years in 2022, I think that conflict is not yet over. If you ask me in my organization, what is it that I want to change so that I can consume powerful threat intel and put in good security practices, that this conflict of control versus convenience should get to an end. After so many years, it has to become a habit. It has to become a routine that, okay, in this aspect, I can't expect convenience. I have to adhere to the controls.
Okay.
And that is something which is not changing. The second thing that I would say is that after knowing that so many threats exist and so much of things are happening around, a better change management is required. People still do off the record things, pawn out a VM, do something in it, install something, bypass firewall. All those things people still do, and technical people, like you were saying, those who know about all these things. Maybe that is because of their overconfidence that I know everything. That has to change.
So that errant behavior needs to change.
So all these things are something which, whatever quality threat intel you have, whatever good practices you have, however powerful your sources of threat intel may be, unless these things don't stop, that all is of no use. It's like a gold locked into a locker with no keys to it, you know.
Right. Mr. Godekar?
I think what Shailen was said sometime back about name and shame, I will say that if time has come for reward and recognition.
To change that.
Yeah, we have to change the attitude actually. We have to go into the reward and recognition. We have to look at how we can actually, like, not only about threat intelligence, but multiple things actually, specifically in cybersecurity. It is all about how you're cultivating the cybersecurity maturity and what kind of a risk-based approach you are taking actually.
Correct.
And how you are actually, inculcating a cybersecurity skill set in the organization. Because that is the crux of it. It's all about, like many of the folks talked about, like, we have very new gen people actually who are working with us, who are having a very tech savvy. They understand cybersecurity very well. They have a hands-on experience with the tools and technologies. But the most important question is that how we are utilizing it, whether we are utilizing it efficiently or not. And that is the most critical question. So the time has come to give a freedom, liberty, knowledge, and power to the new next gen to make sure that they are aware about the technology tools which are there. They use it optimum level, and make sure that we are creating the next level of cyber warriors who can actually help us to use better threat intelligence, better tools and technologies, and make sure that we are actually making sure that they are rewarded on what they are actually doing in their fields. So I think that is the thing which we as a cybersecurity professional have to adapt, and that is the key actually, because the threat actors will be always remain ahead to us, no matter what kind of a threat intelligence platform you are having, or no matter what kind of a SIM tool you are having, or whatever it is that. It is all about what kind of a cybersecurity DNA your organization is having, and how you are actually cultivating the cybersecurity culture in the organization. So that is going to be the key actually ask from hereafter as a cybersecurity professional to the organizations.
Right. Mr. Tolia?
Taking forward from where he left off, primarily we today do get the board sponsorship and the financial approvals, but at the end of the day, it's a matter of ROI. In this case, it's slightly difficult to quantize, especially for threat intel. It's one of the components among the whole gambit of IS activities that we do. So at the end of the day, with this, if we can bring about a bit of a user behavioral awareness and change, or a staff behavior awareness, or we can add some value to the business processes based on a pattern that is observed, I think we can justify our existence and such services. That's for sure. So it's all about being proactive and converting a threat or a challenge into an opportunity to improve your process. So if we can do that, I think we are through. So it's all about converting technical aspects or a cyber aspect into a language of a banker, which will make sense to the business operations or the customer relationships or whatever. So that I think would be the change we can bring to the table.
Right. Mr. Ramamurthy?
So I think the way I would look at it is twofold. One is, while I do agree with a lot of what my colleagues out here have talked about, two aspects is, one is give it more bottoms up view in terms of encourage some of the down the order, down the hierarchy, and expose them to what's the downsides of what happens, right? It was interesting in our organization, we've started to showcase some of the downsides of what happens in case you expose yourself to certain things, not only for a personal, but also for the company for which you work. So there is a lot of network that happens at the brass tacks level. That network then says, hey, you know what, this happens, so don't do it. This happens, don't do it. So that informal network then gets fairly well connected, and then the join the dots happen well. So that's one thing we've seen. The second part of it is really keep your ears to the ground at a senior level. It's both ways. Keep the ears to the ground, because a lot of the times there are multiple emails that you should encourage people to say, hey, you have a problem right here. You have a problem, you do believe there's something not going right, write to this. Without having any fear of repercussions, of saying, this guy just writes an email just for the heck of it and makes you run around. But to be able to invite some things, I think it helps. So which means not just a top-down push, but also a bottom-up ask. I think helps appreciation. And the moment you appreciate, and the moment you are aware, I do believe that a lot of internal risks, because I still believe a lot what happens is more internal. So if you are able to mitigate that to a large extent, you're in much better control. So apart from what my friends here said, these are a couple of areas that I would want to put on the table.
Mr. Kothawali?
Wishes were horses. But I think I would look at it differently, and it comes out of my conversation which I keep on having with my CISO, which is in terms of as a cybersecurity professional or as a risk professional, you need to earn your seat at the table. So you may want culturally for things to change, for that support, for that budget. But what's management? You're the management, and you are responsible for the 14,000 people down below. So I think you have to influence to set the tone at the top. So for example, we used to have this conversation a couple of years back. Now it's not such a difficult conversation, where the CISO used to say that I don't get a time slot in the board meeting, or even if I present something, they just listen and they don't react. Do they understand? I said, if you speak in a technical language, they may not. But if you speak in a language which they understand, and which both of us let us learn, let us see how do we try to influence them. Then we did some tactical stuff like sending them to trainings because we thought we are much better trained on cybersecurity than them. So can we do some of that? So we send them to the Institute of Directors to do some of that. So can you create that environment?
So reverse mentoring of
Reverse mentoring. And then you're in a position to ask. And then the insights which we got, because we got some mind space from them, and then we were able to influence. And I'll give you a prime example. 10, 12 years back, or even a few years back in India, in business continuity, when we used to say about pandemic as a risk, globally it was recognized, but in India it was never recognized. And only when COVID came and struck us did we really realize how important it is. And then we stood up for the occasion. And then we give it as an example saying, because you had built a framework, because you had some governance around it, you were able to deal with it when it came and struck you. So then use your success model and then try to bargain, then try to get things. But yeah, if I were given a magic wand and things, I think there's a lot of bureaucratic tangle which we ourselves create. We could build in more simplicity in the organization, which will help us hear the signals from the noise. And as Mahesh also said, allow people at the down below also in terms of having a voice to be heard. That's where they will understand what cybersecurity is all about. Otherwise, you'll still have people clicking into phishing emails and trying to get that extra bonus money and whatever stuff we keep on doing. And
it is such a big drive for.
Yeah, and very frankly, when we send some of these, we do through our ethical hacking. So sometimes my team sends some of these emails to test people. I said next time you send it also to the very senior people, and they offered Amazon vouchers. And then I forgot about it. And after 3 months, I also clicked on one of that email. So yeah, human greed knows no boundaries. So yeah.
Mr. Subramanian.
What I would like to happen means increased awareness. Somebody said culture, security culture should be imbibed into both enterprise employees as well as customers, so that there is no weak chain is not at all there. Means everybody should look at risk first. Whenever he's taking the next step in a digital transaction, he should first look at the risk involved and then only go ahead. This should get into the DNA of people. This is what I would like to happen.
Stefan, from your global experience and from your interactions with customers across the world, what do you think are the basic building blocks? What do you think organizations should set right before they have expectations from their threat management platform?
I think we heard a lot of wise things here already, and I think you said, culture and education and practice, I would add as a third component, to actually practice incidents and see how that goes. But overall, I think, I'm listening to you here, and what I think in general is that I'm constantly flipping between being a pessimist and an optimist. I think there's been tremendous progress over the last couple of years in awareness, all the way up to board level about the issues as such. 5 years ago, most boards would never think of bringing the CISO in there to present, and now it's a pretty natural thing to do. So in that sense, it's positive. On the other hand, what scares me most maybe is how creative the bad guys are. The whole ransomware thing, the reason that became so difficult was really because they were innovating not on the technology side, but on the business model side. When they set up these ransomware as a service things, they were soliciting help from many and paying a commission for those who help them. So, in one way, it scares me. On the other hand, I think, that's also what makes it fascinating to be in this business, that it's, it's like playing chess or something, and you have a very intelligent counterpart. And as you say, they are very, very financially incentivized. So it's not like they will go away. We've seen that legislation doesn't have, because there are always safe havens somewhere in the world which they can operate out of. So maybe my final word is
and
that
they have so much funding.
exactly, exactly, because exactly that too. I mean, that's another aspect.
And is that the reason why you don't have business relationships with Russia, China?
So we've taken a very firm stance from the start of our company. We said that I don't think you have to decide on which half of the world you work with here. So we've said that we do not work with countries like Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. But we think the Western world and their friends, as we call them, it's always hard because India, Singapore are places where we're very active. We know who the primary enemies are, and it's very much, as you say, because those are safe havens. There are two things. There are safe havens for criminals, but it's also examples of states where there is very tight collaboration between the criminals and the state-run organizations. Have jokingly saying that in Russia, you have a daytime job in a government agency, and then at night you use the same tools in the ransomware gang you're working with, right? So it was interesting, by the way, I think when the Russians arrested our evil this summer.
Protectors become the perpetrators.
Well, I was half joking at that time saying to my friends that maybe that wasn't an arrest, maybe they were just being recruited to go work for the government instead. And I think we're seeing some of that. Clearly that was part of the Russian escalation of capacity on that side.
One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. We don't know.
I think the English term is privateer, right? That back in the 1700s, you had these pirates who were sanctioned by the king. As long, in Sweden we have them. They were, as long as they attacked Danish ships, they could do whatever they liked. But God have them if they went after Swedish ships. And it's exactly the same. I mean, the ransomware gangs are the modern days privateers, right? So, but I'm a very optimistic person. I think, if we work more together, and if we can educate people, I think we have good hopes down the road.
That's where it all leads up to be. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I really appreciate your being here and being so patient and attentive and interactive in this conversation. In the time that we had, we tried to cover a lot of ground. We spoke about the threat intelligence, and we got very realistic perspectives from all of you, and what your expectations are from the vendors, from the platforms, what are the challenges you're seeing within your organization. And I hope that all of you will be working towards it and solve some of these challenges and be able to amp up your security posture. Thank you so much for being with us today, and have a lovely evening. I think we can head to the bar now. Thanks.
Thank you for your very qualified way of leading this whole discussion.
Thank you so much, Stefan.
Thank you.